A few weeks ago, I was on the mountain with my dogs hiking our usual trail when suddenly they bolted toward a colossal pine tree and began barking furiously at something in it. As I moved closer to see what the thing was, I saw that there were actually two things: twin bear cubs. I called those dogs to me with all the authority I could muster before losing my voice to terror, and by some miracle they followed me back down the trail just as Mama Bear showed her face. I was so relieved they chose to follow me, because they don't always. My dogs are loving and protective, loyal to a fault, but they are also easily distracted by the many smells and sounds on that mountain. They want to follow me, I can tell they do, but it doesn't take much to get them off course. And I get it. I am that way too, if I'm being honest. I have made the intentional decision to follow Jesus because I am so compelled by how he lived, and I truly believe that the world would be a much better place if we could follow his example. When I am following Jesus, I feel that I am the best version of myself, but I don't always succeed, because following Jesus is hard and sometimes I fail. That's why our Bible lesson today is one I can so relate to. It's a story of one disciple trying to follow Jesus and failing rather dramatically. You might know the story, which is found only in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14. You see, Jesus and his disciples have just fed a huge crowd of people when, immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Now, even if you have never heard this passage before, you've probably heard at least one of the two popular expressions that we get from this story: walking on water and "you of little faith." Walking on water is what proves that Jesus is special, in case we had any doubt up to this point. And "you of little faith" is how Jesus addressed his disciple Peter, who lived up to his nickname by sinking like a rock as soon as the wind began to pick up and he remembered that he was walking on the water, which was technically something he should not have been able to do. Now, this story is often used to teach just those two things. Jesus' ability to walk on water is seen as proof of his divine status as the Son of God. And Peter's inability to do so demonstrates his deficiency in the faith department. Poor, blundering Peter, always the butt of the joke, guaranteed to do the wrong thing, the D+ disciple. Jesus can walk on water, but Peter, he's a sinker. Maybe if he just had more faith. But I think this story offers more nuance than just those two themes. Yes, Jesus is a marvel. I am painfully aware of the high bar he sets, thank you. And while it might make me feel better to pick on poor Peter as though I myself could have done better, I don't think that's the real lesson in this story, at least not the most useful one. I do not think that this story is meant to shame anyone for having little faith. In fact, Jesus himself once said that even just the tiniest amount of faith, as small as a mustard seed even, could be a powerful thing. I actually think Peter is to be commended for having enough faith to step out of the boat, even if it didn't go very well. He was trying, he was learning, he was growing. And even after that rather embarrassing incident, he didn't give up. He kept on following Jesus. He may never have tried to walk on water again, but he didn't have to. You see, walking on water, that was Jesus' thing. I don't know why he did it. I don't know how he did it. And actually, I don't care. Because the main point was not to walk on water, but to get to the other side of the lake. And the reason they were all crossing that lake was that there were people on the other side who needed healing. In the end, it didn't matter one bit how they got there as long as they did. Jesus had his own way of crossing the lake, which turned out to be the wrong way for Peter, but no matter. They still had the boat and they got across that lake anyway. What I love about this story the most is seeing that even when you try to follow Jesus and fail colossally, you do not have to give up. Peter did not drown, and after he had recovered a bit from the shock and maybe a tiny bit of humiliation, he got back to business and crossed that lake to help Jesus do the healing on the other side. Peter is an example for us all, and intentionally so. Matthew's gospel sets Peter up to be the foundation of the church, the growing group of people who would aspire to follow Jesus, which includes these days us. Like it or not, Peter is our spiritual ancestor, and his story is our story, which is humbling but also inspiring. Yes, we are going to try some things that will fail. In our attempts to follow Jesus, we are going to step out of our comfort zone, and sometimes instead of gliding effortlessly across the water, we're going to sink, but that's okay. When that happens, we'll just shake ourselves off and figure out a different way. Swimming, rowing, water skiing. If only Peter had owned a pair of skis on a faster boat. As it is, all he had was a little faith, but that was enough. It was enough to get the movement going as he shared his stories of Jesus and, most importantly, followed Jesus' example and taught others to do the same. I don't know whether it got easier for Peter, but he did get better at it with practice. The book of Acts, which is a sequel to the Gospels, is full of stories of Peter as a leader, teacher, and healer. And in those stories, we see how he continued to grow as a disciple, always learning how to be more inclusive, more loving, more like Jesus. I'm not sure he ever mastered the art of walking on water. The last time Peter saw Jesus across the lake, he swam to meet him. But isn't that great? He found the best way for him to follow Jesus with the skills and abilities that he had. And that is an inspiration to me as a follower of Jesus. There is so much that Jesus did that I would love to do, only I don't have the skills to do it his way. Like healing people with physical, mental, or spiritual afflictions. I wish I could simply place my hands on someone and just watch the pain, the addiction, the depression disappear. I don't know how Jesus did it, and if I pretended to have those skills, I fear that my sinking would only pull others down with me, so I do not pretend to be someone I'm not. If you can't walk on water, don't try to pull others into the deep end with you. But I know the gifts that I do have. I'm a good listener. I can build trust with people. I can help others believe in their value and encourage them to pursue the specific type of healing that they need from those with the appropriate training. That is the Allison way of following Jesus, scaled to fit the skills that I have, however small they may seem. But this lesson extends beyond our personal efforts to follow Jesus. Remember, Peter's story is about Peter, but it is also about the church Peter represents. As a community of faith, we are called to collectively follow Jesus, which is a powerful thing because together we can accomplish much more than any individual. Even the greatest saints of all time, the Mother Teresas of the world, they have teams to support their ministry. And ministry is never one size fits all. It has to fit the team and their skills. We can be inspired by the work of incredible teams like Mother Teresa's, but not all of us will be successful on that scale, at least not in the beginning. But we look around and we notice where we are, what our own communities might need to thrive, and we find ways to meet those needs. Are people lonely? Are kids behind in reading and math? Well, you don't have to walk on water to host a meal and invite others, or to volunteer an hour a week to tutor third graders. And if you happen to, say, have a church building in the middle of town and within walking distance from a school, you could do these things on a larger scale, right? It's not so much walking on water as it is building a raft and letting folks climb aboard. So the larger entity to which this church is connected, the California-Nevada Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, has adopted a three-part vision statement, the first part being following Jesus. And I do hope that the story of Peter's attempt to walk on water has given us some helpful perspective on what it means to live into that goal of following Jesus. I know it seems daunting because Jesus' footsteps are hard to follow, especially when they lead us beyond the solid ground and into places we're pretty sure we don't know how to walk. But as Peter's story shows us, all it takes is a little bit of faith and the willingness to keep trying even when we fail. We may never learn how to walk on water, but if we work together, we will still be able to row. Bless you in the ways that you are called to follow Jesus.